One of Donald Trump's nominees is achieving the rare feat of setting off alarm bells across the political spectrum, inside and outside of our national security agencies and all across the world today. That would be former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence, the position that oversees the 18 intelligence agencies that are a cornerstone of our national security and our alliances all around the world. It is also the position that is responsible for putting together, for assembling what goes in and stays out of the president's daily brief, the PDB. It's an agenda-setting compilation of the national security information that the American president and the White House uses to make their decisions. For this role, Trump chose someone who has made a career out of defending America's adversaries, the world's autocrats. In 2017, Gabbard made a secret trip to Syria to meet with dictator Bashar al-Assad. Then months later, she said she was skeptical when U.S. intelligence found that Assad was behind a chemical weapons attack that killed dozens of people there. It's a finding that was made with a, quote, very high level of confidence, according to the Secretary of State at the time, Rex Tillerson. Tulsi Gabbard has also been a consistent defender and booster and apologist for Russia's Vladimir Putin. She was instrumental in spreading Russian disinformation and talking points about the war in Ukraine.
Presidents Putin, Zelensky, and Biden, it's time to put geopolitics aside and embrace the spirit of aloha, respect, and love for the Ukrainian people by coming to an agreement that Ukraine will be a neutral country, no military alliance with NATO or Russia, and therefore alleviate the legitimate security concerns of both U.S. and NATO countries as well as Russia, because there'd be no Russian or NATO troops on each other's non-Baltic borders. This would allow the Ukrainian people to live in peace. Aloha.
That video, punctuated by alohas, was posted just 3 days after Russia invaded Ukraine, when civilian casualties were soaring. Millions of Ukrainians were still fleeing. And here she is on Fox News talking about these things in a way that goes too far for Fox News' Sean Hannity.
Putin has made very clear all along that their security, in his mind, is what's at stake here. And they do not want to see
I don't want to interrupt you,
U.S.
but
and NATO
Putin
troops
also said Ukraine is not a country. And he has been saying this going back many, many years. So this has been, these territorial ambitions have existed a long time.
On the security component. They have. They go way back, and they pre-exist this moment that we're facing. But with regards to U.S. and NATO, just like we would not want Russia to come in and start putting their tanks and missiles on our borders, either with Mexico or elsewhere, Russia says, hey, I don't want U.S. and NATO coming and making their military outposts on our borders within Ukraine.
You've lost Sean Hannity. Tom Nichols reports this in The Atlantic today. Quote, when Hannity is trying to shepherd you back toward the airlock before your oxygen runs out, you've come pretty far out there. But it is one thing to appear on Fox News and another thing entirely to be placed in charge, to be given the awesome responsibility of being in charge of America's vast and critically important intelligence community and all of its products and assets. As Nichols continues, quote, Gabbard is stunningly unqualified for almost any cabinet post, as are some of Trump's other picks, but especially for ODNI. She has no qualifications as an intelligence professional, literally none. She is a reserve lieutenant colonel who previously served in the Hawaii Army National Guard with assignments in medical, police, and civil affairs support positions. She has won some local elections and also represented Hawaii in Congress. But leave aside for the moment that she is manifestly unprepared to run any kind of agency. Americans usually accept that presidents reward loyalists with jobs, and Trump has the right to stash Gabbard at some make-work office in the bureaucracy if he feels he owes her. But to make Tulsi Gabbard the DNI, however, is not merely handing a bouquet to a political gadfly. Her appointment would be a threat to the security of the United States. There's brand new reporting from Politico that flags one of the biggest impacts that her appointment would have. Quote, one Western intelligence official said it could lead America's allies to curb how much information they share with Washington. I imagine even Israel will have serious qualms, America's main intelligence partner, on terrorist threats, said the official who spoke anonymously in order to discuss a sensitive issue. Quote, worse still, what some allies share may now be shaped by political goals rather than professional intelligence sharing, said that official. That is where we start today with some of our favorite experts and friends. Former CIA director, now MSNBC senior national security analyst John Brennan's here. With me at the table, former Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs during the Obama administration. Rick Stengel's here. Director Brennan, your thoughts about Tulsi Gabbard?
Well, Nicole, I think you and Tom Nichols have done a great job just underscoring all the concerns that people have about this appointment. Clearly, Tulsi Gabbard has taken actions and made statements over the past several years that really raise serious questions about her common sense, her judgment, as well as her political sympathies. Cozying up to Putin as well as to meeting with Bashar Assad, I think really does show that she doesn't have the type of perspective that is needed for somebody who's going to head up these 18 intelligence agencies. And as Tom Nichols said, she doesn't have any qualifications. The Director of National Intelligence, that's a really serious position and a very complex and complicated one that requires somebody who actually has an understanding of the intelligence community. It's like an orchestra conductor of all the different agencies and departments that are involved in the intelligence process. And I don't think she understands even the instruments that are involved in this orchestra, nor has she had any experience at the strategic level of running and leading a large, complex organization. And the Director of National Intelligence is, according to legislation, the president's principal intelligence advisor, the person who is responsible for making sure that the president's daily brief is put together in a very sound and forthright manner, the person who puts together the budget and the priorities of the intelligence community. So I know that this appointment is sending shockwaves here in the United States, but also around the globe in terms of, is this really somebody who Donald Trump is going to entrust with the care and the leadership of the intelligence community? An unserious pick for a serious position.
Let me show you what John Bolton, who was one of Donald Trump's former national security advisors, had to say about the pick.
She doesn't have any experience in intelligence matters. She has demonstrated repeatedly that she doesn't understand international affairs. She has been quoted as saying that effectively Putin was justified in having Russia invade Ukraine because there were secret American biological weapons laboratories in Ukraine. I mean, this is fantasy land stuff. I think the answer here, that the nomination's clearly going to be made. It is customary for every senior nominee of a president to have a full-field FBI background investigation, particularly in sensitive national security and law enforcement matters. Those investigations could begin now in a smooth transition where the incoming president has beginning to announce his senior appointees, Secretary of State and so on. The outgoing administration can let the FBI loose to do the investigation. And the way the FBI starts its interviews off is, Mr. John Smith is being considered for a senior government job, and I'd like to speak to you about him. That can happen now. Those interviews, including full field investigations for Tulsi Gabbard and Matt Gaetz, could be done basically by January 1.
You know, John Bolton is a smart guy, but I'm not sure what he's talking about. I mean, Trump hasn't signed the memorandum of understanding to commence an actual transition process. I think John Bolton actually makes that point. He goes on to say they don't want the full field investigations. But we're just waiting for the other shoe to drop on who will head the FBI. And it's clear that these people will not receive any of those checks. It's clear that Republicans, anyone trying to cover the Republicans as a bulwark against Trump 3.0 is smoking something that we don't have available in the studio up here. There are no brakes on Trump. So what happens, Director Brennan, to the people that work inside the agencies who are trained in mining the intelligence product for information that helps keep America safe when the person they report to sides with Putin over those very agencies and people inside them?
Well, they need to live up to their oath of office and their professional responsibilities in terms of telling truth to power and making sure that they carry out their intelligence responsibilities to the best of their ability, irrespective of who might be at the top. And the concern that a lot of intelligence professionals have is when individuals will lead these organizations who politicize them. This is something that is very worrisome, I think, to scores of intelligence professionals. I think John Bolton also said that Trump is looking for fealty among these various leaders that he's appointing. He wants individuals who are going to be at his beck and call and do what he wants. And I think one of the most damning notes of Tulsi Gabbard is that Russian television today, the political pundits out there, have been praising her nomination as well as the nomination of Matt Gaetz to be Attorney General. So I think there's the shockwaves that are going through the intelligence community right now about this nomination.